While we continue with that story, we are now joined by Sisa Ngombane, who is the former ambassador to Israel, who is currently the ambassador to Madagascar. Ambassador, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. A lot of developments have happened since you were recalled from Israel by the South African government. What do you make about the latest developments and also the decision that has been taken by the National Assembly yesterday?
Thank you very much, Aljan. Thank you to your listeners. I think for starters, we all have to pay our condolences to the people who have lost their lives since October 7, and especially to the people of Gaza, who almost 15,000 of them have lost their lives. 5,000 of those are said to be children, and 1,000 is babies. So we have arrived at a juncture where a humanitarian and a grave disaster is happening in the land of Palestine that is affecting all the people there.
Yeah. And Ambassador, then yesterday's decision, what do you make of that and how Parliament voted? We also heard from the Freedom Front Plus, for instance, in the clip that we just played there, saying that this is a grave mistake to have the Israeli embassy closed down.
No, I think the voice of the people of South Africa through Parliament was correct to examine that motion and vote on it, because it's an expression of how people feel about the current unfolding disaster that is driven by Israel in the main. I think you have to go back to the historic issue that Palestinians have been dispossessed. It's going for close to a century now that they've had this dispossession, and it has been implemented with violence. So South Africa maintained presence in Israel, and that presence was discussed and agreed upon by the Palestinians themselves, that South Africa would assist them in their presence in Israel to further the interest of the liberation of the Palestinian people. As we see this now again, fading and fading away, we are faced with the problem of whether you can claim that the presence of the South African embassy in Israel is useful to the Palestinian liberational cause. At the moment, we have difficulty in stating that categorically, because we have had claims of genocide being committed. And there are two people who have made this, and they call it a textbook case of genocide. Is the former director of the Human Rights Commissioner, Mr. Craig Mokhibe in New York. And also, there's also Professor Raz Sigal, an Israeli who studies genocide, recent genocide. They have said, we are witnessing a textbook case of genocide being committed against the people of Palestine, specifically in Gaza. So we have got to deal with all these questions. Are we being useful by keeping a presence in Israel?
Yeah. And then, Ambassador, you have lived, of course, in Israel, in Tel Aviv, where we had our embassy there. Your experience around the lived realities of people in Israel, and also now we see that what has come out as well is, for instance, there are Jewish people who have come out to say that they stand against the decisions that have been taken by the Israeli government. What do you make of that? And also, was it any difficult for you to try and foster some sort of solution between Israel as well as Palestine?
Yes, you have to remember, Aljan, that in Israel, you have, of course, the division that exists in the society. At the present moment, we have had a situation where under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, an extreme right-wing religious cabinet has been formed. And that cabinet has, since it took office, reversed all what the Israelis themselves call democratic gains. It has actually said parliament will be supreme. And in Israel, we had a judiciary that could restrain the decision of the cabinet in terms of a settler expansion into Palestinian territory. And this, of course, was useful. But you also have to remember that in what is called Israel, there are still Palestinians who are there. At a given point, it was said population of Israel was 8 million. About 1 million of those are Arabs, Israelis. And therefore, you have had this erosion and erosion and erosion of the rights in Israel, including those who are citizens, Arab citizens of Israel. And the association that is called Association for Civil Rights in Israel, called ACRI, it has been documenting all this legislation that has been put in place to curb and erode all the democratic space that has existed before. So the Israeli moderates, the Israeli people who have been trying to say this is wrong, have been really also coming under severe pressure. And we must understand that any solution that will come, of course, between Palestine and Israel will also need the buy-in of Israelis themselves, that this is possible going forward.
Yeah. In conclusion, Ambassador, there is this deal that has now been brokered by Qatar. Do you think that there could be a lasting solution to it? And also, is a two-state solution still possible as it was the resolution of the United Nations, and considering that you've now mentioned that this has been ongoing now for close to a century?
Yes, we must welcome any attempts to negotiate, to exchange prisoners and hostages. This is important. I think the President Cyril Ramaphosa made it clear that an immediate ceasefire, a lasting ceasefire is needed. And of course, immediate humanitarian assistance must be put into place to assist the people of Gaza who are suffering. So these developments are important, but they are not enough. I think we need the international community to have a very, very strong voice outrage against the continued existence and perpetration of this war against the Palestinians. Yes, on the question of the two-state solution, we are facing a dilemma. One has to look into this with a very cold eyes and ask, what has happened since 1948? All what has happened was the usurpation of more and more and more land which belonged to Palestinians. And this has been used, financed from abroad to go and bolster those settlements. And as we stand today, there are small doors. Gaza is one monogamous enclave, which is also an open-air prison, as this is called. So one has to look at the situation objectively with cold eyes and say, where do we stand? What has been done to the Palestinian people? As for the government and the ruling governing party, the ANC, we have always said we are for the liberation of the Palestinian people. And this is not negotiable, and that our presence and our support will always be directed towards the Palestinian people. So we are looking at this, and we hope the Palestinians themselves will guide us in terms of what should be the next step, how should we contribute, if we need to be, towards a liberation of Palestinians themselves.
Yeah, but there seems to be some differences also between the governing party in Palestine, but also Hamas, around how the two-state solution should look like. And the Hamas, of course, also being accused of trying to wipe out the Jews.
No, there are differences. I think we have to accept that even when we said there's acceptance by Palestinians that there should be a Palestinian state that is established, there was not a unanimous view on that. And unfortunately, the people who said this is possible, because it was predicated on Jews, Israelis, and Palestinians trying to make a way to live together. The first victim, of course, was the former Prime Minister Isaac Rabin, who was assassinated immediately. And from the Palestinian side, you had the late Yasser Arafat, who struggled and struggled to maintain support for the two-state solution, came from exile, established himself in Ramallah, and tried by all means to say, I'm here to negotiate that we all live together in this piece of land. Now, there was always opposition to that. What the past years have done, with support, unfortunately, from the international community, from some sectors, right-wing sectors, even sometimes from the US, it has enabled those rights to be trampled. All the people who said there could be a two-state solution, they have been very marginalized and seem powerless in the state of affairs. And therefore, what you see is the people who use force, who use arms, who use violence, who have taken the upper hand, both in Israel and, of course, from the Palestinian side. So it's going to be very, very difficult. It's a long way to go, but I think we have to say there's no other way we're going to have to go and negotiate a lasting solution to the Palestinian question. And I think one has to say, it's not impossible. You have Egypt. Egypt has been in war several times with Israel. And Egypt agreed on a ceasefire. And Egypt has tried in all difficult situations to maintain a stability and a very, very difficult relationship with Israel. But it was found that it is the best way for the Egyptians to do. I think for the Palestinians themselves, it is also going to be the same.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. That is the former ambassador to Israel, Sisa Ngombane. What do you make of all the issues that he raises, considering that this has been an ongoing war? And he says that what has happened since 1948, and it's close to a century now that this war has been ongoing. What is your take on it? Also looking at the decision and the voting that happened yesterday in the National Assembly, voting in favor of severing diplomatic ties with Israel. Of course, that is a prerogative of the government, that is the state, to decide whether or not those diplomatic ties will be cut and whether or not the embassy in Pretoria, that is the Israeli embassy, will be shut down. We know that Israel has already decided to recall their ambassador. So what do you make of all of these developments? You can drop me an X at the agenda _ SABC and also at Aldrin. Let's take